Hello and welcome to On Point. I'm Joe Willeford. As the 2020 presidential election approaches, efforts to register and educate voters continue to grow. More than any time in recent history, the focus is on young voters. There is a lot going on in American politics today. The competition among the large field of Democratic candidates is becoming more intense as the candidates try to break through to win the nomination and then face Donald Trump in the general election. Los Angeles County is introducing a new voting system called Voting Solutions for All People. Other changes are coming statewide in an effort to increase access to potential voters. Californians will now have 11 days to vote and will be able to register to vote the day of the election. Many experts believe the youth vote will be pivotal in the upcoming election. Some CSUN students say they are following politics right now, but they haven't yet decided on a candidate.
It depends. Because, I'd like to see change. I just want to see change the right way. And I don't think like a bunch of yelling and screaming, especially in the Democratic Party, will help their cause to beat Trump in the next election.
I can tell you that right now I'm undecided, but I will be voting for the Democratic Party. I'm between Elizabeth Warren or Kamala Harris.
On Point's Tammy Benitez has more on the story.
Thanks, Joe. And today I'd like to welcome my two guests. I have Chair of CSUN's Political Science Department, David Leitch, and I also have Founder and Chair of Northridge Indivisible, Michelle Fowle. So let's get straight to it, guys. Why are young voters so important in this upcoming election? I'll start with you, Dr. Leitch.
Why are young voters so important in this upcoming election? Young voters are always important, let me say. Young people vote at rates that are much less. Voting participation tends to climb with age. And one of the things that means is that meaningfully structures the sort of political agenda, because politicians are, broadly speaking, responsive to who votes. The more people turn out to vote, the more politicians are creating policy to try and cater to them. So that's just sort of in general. In this election in particular, I actually do think that young voters are unusually important. And part of the reason for that is that what we're seeing developing right now since about 2014-ish is not just a sort of traditional partisan split in the country, but also a generational split. So there are plenty of young voters, for example, who identify as Republicans or identify as conservative. But what that means for young voters is actually very different, especially on the right, than what that means for older voters. So young Republican voters just look very different in terms of not just their what policies they think are important, but sort of the content of policies as well. And that's much more important. That's much more emphatic on the Republican side than the Democratic side right now. We don't always see that in American politics. So I think that we're in a cycle now where we're starting to see real changes in what the party labels mean and what it means to be either liberal or conservative. And that's all the more reason for sort of young people to get out and get their policy preferences met.
Thank you, Dr. Leitch. Michelle?
Well, that goes without saying. Every vote is really important, and every election is really important. And I think, I was one of those people who used to be younger, that I didn't know a lot about politics, and I hardly voted. I didn't really pay attention. It didn't really affect me too much. I didn't think so. And as I started, to his point, as I started getting older, I started paying more attention to see what, affected me. And I'm seeing, young voters who are preferring not to choose a party. They want to be independent. They don't want to be associated with a party, but they want to make their voice heard. And I'll give you an example that I gave my 12-year-old niece at the time. We went to canvass for Katie Hill up in Santa Clarita area, and she was doing great. As a 12-year-old, I was really surprised that she wasn't whining or anything. And about an hour in, she's on her phone, and she's like, okay, I'm really tired now, and I'm not really political anyway. And I hear that a lot from young people, and I'm like, wow, okay. I said, so you like your Instagram there that have your nose buried into? And she's like, well, yeah. I said, okay, cool. So if we don't finish this, the other side wants to monetize that, so you have to pay to get on that platform. Do you think your single mom would be totally down with that? And she was like, what? She's like, we have to finish. So it's really marrying the, politics is not separate from your everyday life. And doing a lot of voter education, is really important.
Dr. Leitch, this question is for you. Has there been another time in recent American history where the young voters mattered as much as this upcoming election?
I mean, it depends on what you count as recent American history. I think certainly in the 1960s, we saw a similar shift to what we're seeing right now, where young voters have a very different conception of what it meant to be liberal, what it meant to be conservative, what it meant to be a Democrat, and what it meant to be a Republican. And keep in mind, in the mid-60s, not all Democrats were liberal, not all Republicans were conservative. We've had ideological sorting basically since then. And that ideological sorting has happened at least in part because of the choices young voters made sort of during the 1960s in terms of pushing the parties in these respective directions. But I think that's the most recent period that I would point to.
So, Michelle, you're an activist, and on your website it says, I believe any white person's moral obligation is to get in the fight. Can you please elaborate on that?
Absolutely. That's a great question, and I'm really happy that you asked that. After the 2016 election, I'm a Democrat. I was devastated and terrified. And at that moment is when I realized, oh my God, this is what people of color have been feeling forever. Where have I been? And I was beside myself, and my husband's just like, my God, I've never seen you like this, because I'm pretty resilient, but I'm like, everything kind of came over me, like guilt and fear and, wanting to do something. And every time we would go out, I would see, someone of color, and I would just hug them and start crying and apologize. Be at the movie theater, be at the grocery store, it didn't matter. And I didn't really know what to do. So I kind of had to go through this mourning process. I didn't know a lot about politics, because things didn't really affect me too much as a white person. So I had to really, dive into that. And so I started getting really educated. I mean, I didn't even know California had its own Congress. And, my husband's like, please don't tell people that. But I think it's important to tell people that, because I think that that's a lot of people, especially a lot of white people who, things don't affect them all the time. And so they think like, well, black people have the same opportunities as white people. Well, no, they don't. That's not true. And so, there is structural racism, systemic racism that people don't think. And people like to put things in buckets like, well, I didn't say the N-word, so I'm not racist. And that is wrong. And so it's being an ally. I called Black Lives Matter. It's like, do you take white people? I didn't know what to do. And then I actually found a group called White People for Black Lives, which is awesome. And I highly suggest people get into that and learn about, how you can be an ally and how you can speak up for people of color. And you don't have to take care of them. It is not their job to teach you. It's your job to teach yourself and to teach each other. And I think that we can have the most kick-ass country ever. I don't know if I'm allowed to cuss, but I got super excited.
Well, do you think there is a difference between a white political activist and an activist of color?
A difference in what sense?
Maybe in what they can do or what they can say, how you brought up
a
certain privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, the way that it's the structural racism and institutional racism is, it just makes it so much harder for them. And, I've marched with the DACA kids. I've been to many immigrant marches, and they're like, oh, Michelle's going to speak. And I'm like, I am, okay. And they would have to translate. And, I got more attention. They took me more seriously, which I found to be horrifying and upsetting. But, I think that white people, it is our moral obligation. If you've had good opportunity and, you didn't realize this was going on because slavery was, however long ago, it's still happening. And, I encourage you to get anxious, get in the fight, and learn about how to have those conversations and to help lift other people up. That's the bottom line.
So Michelle, how does someone become an activist?
Well, you go to activist.com. I'm kidding. There's no, I don't know if there is, but I was in corporate America forever, and you know, I had a marketing company for a long time, and companies would hire me to kind of fix broken situations. But when this election happened, I was so freaked out. I'm like, I can't not do something. Like, I just can't. And this is far beyond me. You know, this is for the future. This is for everybody. So then the Women's March, I'm like, okay, the Women's March, okay, we're going to do that. Let's go do that. And we did that in DC. And then I came back and I'm like, okay, what's next? What's next? Like, I couldn't stop. So I'm used to leading. So I had, I just, you know, they were like, oh, okay, do this like huddle thing. And I'm like, okay, we're going to do that. And I brought in some friends that have been activists since they were teenagers. I'm like, can you help me? Because I don't really totally know what to do. And so they helped me, and then Indivisible came about, and they gave us the tools, and that blew up. So I just aligned myself. It's just the passion. It's something that is in you that won't go away. And so I started talking to people who have been doing this for a long time. I would ask a lot of questions. I would volunteer. I would sweep the floor. I didn't care, you know. I was making a lot of money. And I gave it up, and I'm like, I will sweep your floor for a job. That's okay. Because this time in our country is so dark, and I can't sit by and just because it doesn't affect me directly. That's wrong. I think that you have a moral obligation to do something, and you got to meet people where they are. Not everybody's like, you know, like, I'm going to quit my job and go do this, you know. And I understand that, you know, and it's just empowering other people. Everybody in my group is a first-time activist. So I lead from behind. I'm like, you can do it. Like, we're just regular citizens. There's nothing special, like, you know, but you do the work. And one of my favorite sayings is, you know, activism is like a hot new thing. You know, it's like, oh, I'm an activist. Yeah, I'm an activist. And so I challenge people. I'm like, how many of you, you know, are an activist? Or how many of you are like a real revolutionist? Like, you know, want to make change? Yeah. And I go, okay, great. Because the real revolutionist is the one who is concerned with the least glamorous stuff. So when you're out there doing the work and you're sweating and you're knocking on doors and you're talking to voters and you're doing voter education, that is the least glamorous work, but that is the most effective work. And I encourage young people, man, you guys, I worked on March for Our Lives. I worked, you know, Women's March, youth director, and young people, you guys have stuff to say. And I encourage you, and I will back you up. I will just be in the background.
So this question is for both of you guys. Have you seen a rise in young adults becoming more politically active? Dr. Leitch, I'll start with you.
I think it's gotten probably more complicated in some ways. I think, sort of like you were gesturing towards, the most effective forms of any kind of political engagement, sort of activism or within the system, sort of structural engagement, party engagement, the most effective forms of engagement are face-to-face. Right, like people don't really respond to a flyer. People don't really respond to a phone call. And my sense is that young people right now are struggling to find opportunities for that face-to-face interaction. That so many interactions are mediated by a screen of some type, mediated by text of some type, that there aren't just sort of places for people to be. This is a problem on campus, you can see, that there aren't places for people to just sort of be bodies with one another and to talk with one another. So my impression is that many young people recognize the stakes of politics much more sharply than they did 15, 20 years ago. And they understand why politics matters, why politics is not just sort of something over there. And there's an awareness of the pervasive importance of politics, but there's also some real frustrations about how to engage politically, what political engagement really looks like. And so the answer I would give is it's complicated. I think that there is a tremendous amount of potential energy that is looking for a route. And I'm hopeful that it finds that route.
Michelle?
Oh, I could totally help you find that route. Not a problem. And I can help you set up your own group. And, you know, I mean, Indivisible seem to attract like middle-aged women and know if 16, 17, 18-year-old wants to hang out with that. I mean, seriously, I'm fun. I'm a little more different, but I'm totally happy to show you how to do it, to empower you to start your own and show you how to get involved. And it's really just about finding your tribe. I mean, you can do it. Trust me. And you guys would be amazing. Love working with students.
Michelle, does Indivisible have a target demographic?
In a target demographic?
Yeah.
Like
Do you usually try to appeal to young voters, or is it just more broad?
Well, it's very specific the way that it's set up. It was. Do you know how Indivisible got started?
No, I do not, but I'm sure everyone at home is curious as well.
Okay, I will tell you, and in my animated, happy way. So, when Trump got elected, there was two congressional staffers that were sitting in a bar in Texas that were like, "Oh my God, what do we do?" And so they're like, "Well, I guess we can put out this guide, and we can give it to people to show them how to resist the Trump agenda." Like how the Tea Party did when Obama was in office. And so they put out this guide, and we got a hold of it. It was on the news, and then it just blew up into this massive, because I didn't know California had its own Congress. I didn't even know we had an assembly member. I didn't even know what it was. And so what am I going to do? I had no idea what to do. And so with this guide, and they would just lay out the strategy. This is what you do. This is what's effective. And so there's so much going on, and it can be overwhelming, and then you could just withdraw. I mean, that's how some people handle stress, but I encourage you to move into the anxiety, but choose what you want to do. If you're passionate about climate, make that your thing. That's fine. If you start a group and somebody over here is also passionate about, healthcare, good. Put them in charge of healthcare. There's lots of stuff to do. And, in 2017 and 18, our goal was to resist, stop the bleeding as much as possible, and then elect progressive candidates into office. And one part of that goal was flipping the House in 2018, which we did. And so we looked around and we're like, who's the closest? And it happened to be Katie Hill. And so we spent a lot of time there, and people were in Orange County, people were everywhere. And they gave us the tools, here's what you do. So it was really helpful.
Dr. Leitch, do you believe a lack of political knowledge is the reason younger people don't vote?
Younger people have historically not voted, and the literature is actually not incredibly clear on why that's the case. So there are a variety of theories that are bandied about. Part of it is some people contend it's a lack of political knowledge, sort of not being able to connect political activity with political outcomes. Some people contend that it's that young people are sort of frequently getting careers going, they're in the middle of school, they're working in ways that are very distracting. A third school of thought sort of points to mobility, that is, young people are still moving around, and there's a lot of literature that suggests that it's much easier to get involved in politics when you are set in your community, where you feel an effective connection to your community, where you feel like you're part of the community. And that helps both with sort of prompting you to engage in politics, but also in your political efficacy. And that's why I think sort of some of the points you're making about sort of getting out there and talking about the local community. I mean, that's what politics, I think, sort of has to look like in a lot of ways. So it's not clear why young people are not as politically engaged. It's still a puzzle we're working on.
I am convinced it's because they don't see how it connects. That's my theory. And local is, I can almost say it's even more important than presidential, because local affects you exactly right where you are, and people overlook that. The other thing you can do is go to a nonpartisan website, like League of Women Voters is good, to see what they suggest, and they break it down in more digestible terms to, instead of the political flyers that you're like, I don't know what this means, Yeah.
Yeah, and not just getting involved sort of in terms of local issues, but getting involved in sort of the nuts and bolts of local politics. You know, school board elections are incredibly important.
Huge.
Zoning board elections.
Yep.
If you want to talk about sort of where structural racism lives, zoning patterns are an incredibly important part of that story. Neighborhood councils.
Yep.
You know, recently there's been this big kerfuffle about putting in the horrors of public transit coming to CSUN. The primary resistance is organized through the local neighborhood councils. The local neighborhood councils are desperate to have people serve on them.
Yep.
And it's trivially easy. It's very easy. It's very straightforward to get onto a neighborhood council. So it's just not that hard. And at that local level, I think you're absolutely right. Like you can make a profound difference for the immediate people around you at the local level without sort of having to deal with these larger issues of of how do we steer a country of hundreds of millions of people.
Yeah. And that's how you do it too. And also that's exactly what you just like pulled everything right out of my head. That's like perfect. And but it also builds up a good pipeline too. Yep. So for people who, you know, want to run at the state level, or maybe they want to be a senator, or maybe eventually the president. So that's important. But yeah, local neighborhood councils are huge. And those meetings that maybe we think are boring, like they're talking about transportation. Well, the other people are there, you know, and stopping things. It could be like 5 people that are stopping things.
Yeah.
You know, if it's something that you care about, definitely should show up.
Dr. Leitch, how do you think the new voting system in California will affect the election?
Positively, I hope. I think that reducing any barrier to voting is a good idea. Like at a basic level, I should say, I think that reduction of barriers to voting are just a good idea. If what you think is that the legitimacy of policy stems from the demos participating, from citizens coming together and participating in that. Like if you think that that's an important link, that we ought to recognize the legitimacy of policy because of that, then I think that you are also committing yourself to expanding the electorate to, or the selectorate to maximizing access. The trade-off here, and I think it's a real trade-off to be concerned about in practical matters, is that when you expand access, in many ways you're sort of expanding the access for bad actors. And the bad actors I'm thinking of here are, cybersecurity, that clearly there have been attempts to incur in the election from foreign actors, from sort of organized foreign actors. When you expand in the way that LA is doing digitally, that creates some very serious risks from a security standpoint. And those are the reservations I would have. But at a basic level, maximizing access is, I think, what you like. I can't understand why this is a partisan issue. Americans who believe in democracy ought to be in favor of maximizing access.
So I know you guys don't have a crystal ball or anything, but do you think Trump can be beaten by an upcoming candidate, or is impeachment the only way to get him out of office? I'll start with you, Michelle.
I don't think you should impeach a president because you're trying to win an election. Like, that is crazy. I think that you impeach a president when he or she commits impeachable offenses. It's black and white. It's very simple. It's the right thing to do. It's the moral thing to do. This guy he's lawless, basically. And, he doesn't care. And he's bringing in the government to help him commit crime. That's a big deal. So I don't know. I mean, going up to the 2018 midterms, I didn't know. I had no idea if we were going to win or what. But every day I would go out and do something, and I would empower others to go out and do something. And it's really important to meet people where they are. So I always say, like, not everybody can be, commit all this time, and that's okay. I just say be a raindrop. And some days you'll be a little mist, and some days you'll be a big raindrop. But as long as you continue to do the work, the dam will break. So as far as, I don't know, I'm not into like, oh, we need somebody electable. I'm into, somebody who is on the right side of history and is making good decisions and is bold. And that's what we need. This isn't a safety thing. You gotta be bold, and you have to participate. And then your job isn't done. When they're elected, you gotta hold them accountable. That's what we do for, if you're a citizen, that's what citizens do, It's a daily, that's how democracy should be working.
Dr. Leitch?
I mean, can a Democratic candidate beat Trump? 100%. A Democratic candidate is capable of beating Trump. I think the 2018 midterms indicated that there is sufficient turnout possibility for Democrats to beat Trump. Trump is a historically unpopular president. The conditions are ripe for him to be defeated. But also, there seems to be a very high floor. So there's a very low ceiling, a very high floor. His approval rating has bounced between this very, very, very small range. Is that a range that is beatable? That is 100% beatable. But I think that the things that would maximize the likelihood of that would be the sort of resurgence of the Obama coalition. I mean the Obama coalition not in sort of racial terms, but the Obama coalition in generational terms, right? Young people turned out for Obama. If young people turn out for Democratic candidate, then I think at the rates that they turned out for Obama, I think that Trump would be in very, very serious trouble. But that depends on turnout.
It's all about turnout. Like, there's way more of the people who are on the right side of history than there are not. So getting people, I've heard young people like, well, they don't really excite me. I get it. Trust me, I understand. But there's so much at stake. Like, your future is literally at stake. I'll be dead and gone. I want you to have a good life, and it is really crucial. And I'm super fun, so we can make activism fun.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you guys so much for being here.
Sure.
Thanks for having us.
us.
You're on your boat. Your engines are dead. You're starting to sink, and you can't get a cell phone signal. Thankfully, you have a Marine VHF radio on board tuned to Channel 16. The Coast Guard and other boaters monitor distress calls on Channel 16. A radio is the best way to call for help. Don't assume a cell phone will work. Communication is your lifeline. Be sure you're heard.
Thank you for watching On Point. You can follow us on social media at CSUN On Point. You can hear us on KCSN 88.5 FM on Sunday mornings at 5:30. You can watch us on Santa Clarita Valley Television on Sundays at 5 and on LA 36 at 4 on Thursday afternoons and 7:30 on Friday nights. For all of us here at On Point, I'm Joe Willeford.